He decided to not follow police orders, and he found out the hard way. This lady decided to instigate a fight while pregnant. Just why? This mother-daughter duo decided to plan out their incriminating devious plan over texts, and this housekeeper decided she was going to get a Christmas bonus, no matter what. Let's get right into the dumbest and worst decisions people make, starting with number 6. Hear them out. When Kevin Penn called the police to stop a robbery at his Decatur, Alabama liquor store, he thought he was doing the right thing. But moments after officers arrived, what should have been a routine response left him arrested with a busted-up jaw, missing teeth, and an obstruction of justice charge, all courtesy of the Decatur Police Department. So what on earth happened? The whole crazy thing began when Penn had detained a suspected shoplifter in his store using a firearm and called the police. But despite taking precautions to ensure everyone's safety, including disarming his firearm and placing it on the counter, the situation spiraled out of control when officers arrived. Body camera footage later revealed what exactly had gone wrong. Officers had apparently misinterpreted Penn's movements when they arrived and saw a firearm on the counter and a magazine in his hand. Although Penn had already disarmed the firearm and moved away from it, officers still thought it posed a threat. As Penn tried to explain the situation, officers shouted commands for him to put the weapon down, despite the fact that he had already disarmed and moved away from it. During the confusion, one officer rushed forward and punched Penn, breaking his jaw and knocking out a tooth. To make matters worse, Penn was arrested at the scene and charged with obstruction of justice, a misdemeanor, despite maintaining that he had complied with safety measures and posed no threat. The incident sparked widespread outrage, with Penn filing a lawsuit against the city and the involved officer, citing police misconduct and a broader pattern of misuse within the department. The police department defended the officer's actions, explaining their very understandable concerns about potential threats due to the presence of a firearm. Chief Nate Allen emphasized the importance of compliance in such situations, especially when firearms are involved. Listening carefully to officers' commands during tense encounters can be critical for ensuring safety. However, Penn's attorney argued that the surveillance footage contradicted the officer's claims, showing that Penn had already disarmed and moved away from the firearm before being struck. The case took years to resolve, with a judge ultimately finding Penn not guilty of obstruction of justice. The charges, Penn's attorney argued, should have been dropped much earlier. The absurd legal battle left Penn questioning his trust in law enforcement, which would be pretty understandable. Penn's decision to keep the magazine in his hand while officers were arriving was dumb, as it was obviously confused for a firearm. His hand should have been empty and his palms displayed. Why he chose to hold onto it rather than just dropping it is anyone's guess, but that decision set the stage for this entire mess. This doesn't excuse the police response, but when officers believe their lives are on the line, they're going to react. To be clear, we're not saying Penn deserved to get hit. This was a confusing situation, but he should have listened more carefully to their commands. Ultimately, the lesson here is that listening to officers when firearms are involved is extremely important, as there are countless examples of situations like this taking a far worse turn. Number 5. Picking battles. In December of 2018, Marche Jones, then 5 months pregnant, was involved in a dispute with another woman, Ebony Jemison, outside a Dollar General in Pleasant Grove, Alabama. The confrontation, apparently over the baby's father, escalated, resulting in Jemison discharging a firearm and hitting Jones in the stomach. Tragically, the unborn child didn't survive. Authorities initially charged Jemison, but a grand jury declined to indict her, concluding that she acted in self-defense. Instead, Jones was the one who was actually indicted, with prosecutors arguing that she started the fight and needlessly put her unborn child in harm's way. Of course, the charge was widely criticized, with many questioning the legal precedent and fairness of holding a pregnant woman criminally responsible for her own injury and the loss of her fetus. Jefferson County District Attorney Lenice Washington eventually dismissed the case against Jones, basically saying both parties had been through enough. Washington expressed gratitude to the grand jury for their service, but emphasized that prosecutorial discretion was necessary to serve justice. The case ignited debates on maternal rights and the criminalization of pregnancy. Advocacy groups like the Yellow Hammer Fund condemned the indictment, arguing it set a dangerous precedent, potentially targeting pregnant individuals for actions deemed harmful to their fetuses. Critics highlighted broader implications, fearing similar charges for behaviors such as consuming alcohol or neglecting prenatal care. While Jones avoided prosecution, her case is one more in the ongoing debate around reproductive rights, legal accountability, and societal expectations of pregnant individuals. Do you think the law made the right decision in this case? Should someone who's knowingly pregnant be held accountable for actions that could put their unborn child at risk, such as starting a fight? Or is this more about the right to privacy, where decisions involving a woman's body are solely her choice and responsibility? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Number 4. Florida man feedings. In Daytona Beach, Florida man Paul Fortin, a 67-year-old veteran, was arrested after a years-long habit of feeding a wild alligator he named Hank. This unusual relationship, spanning 3 years, ended with Fortin being charged for resisting arrest and refusing to accept a citation for illegally feeding wildlife. Fortin, a confused man who described Hank as a good friend, an impossibility for reptiles given their brain structures, posted a video on Facebook showing himself feeding and even petting the 10-foot alligator. The footage, reported to authorities by a neighbor, was used as evidence in the investigation. Despite being shown the video of him clearly feeding an alligator, Fortin insisted he had only been feeding turtles, though he later admitted to kind of knowing it was illegal to feed alligators. Feeding wildlife, particularly alligators, is prohibited in Florida due to obvious safety concerns. According to the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, known as the FWC, such behavior can lead alligators to associate humans with food, increasing the risk of people becoming that food. It also interferes with their ability to hunt naturally, putting both humans and wildlife at risk. Fortin's arrest occurred when FWC officers confronted him at his home. He refused to sign the citation and attempted to enter his house, leading to his restraint and arrest. Following the incident, Fortin expressed disbelief and complained that his plans for Memorial Day weekend were being disrupted. We guess getting yourself arrested for stupid things tends to do that. Although Fortin claims he hasn't seen Hank since his arrest, making their relationship seem like it has run its course, but he has noticed other alligators in the area. Florida, home to an estimated 1.3 million alligators, experiences frequent human-alligator interactions, especially during mating season. Leave it to a Florida man to try and bond with a dinosaur, right? With the American crocodile population in Florida growing, let's hope Fortin doesn't get too confused because he could end up being some croc's dinner if he makes a mistake. Number 3. Not stand-up hour attempts. A 70-year-old Miami resident, Alan Borinsky, was arrested at Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport after joking about having an explosive device in his bag. The incident unfolded when 2 witnesses overheard Borinsky telling a passenger that if the device in his bag goes off prematurely, that he apologizes to her family in advance. So of course, they freaked out and reported his remarks to authorities. Borinsky admitted to police that his comment was meant to be funny as he was attempting to flirt, but said that he knew what he said was wrong. Despite this, he was charged with making a false report, a second-degree felony under Florida law. The statute criminalizes knowingly making false claims about explosives. After being taken into custody, Borinsky was released on a $7,500 bond. Everyone knows you can't make jokes like that at an airport these days, harmless as they may seem. It might feel over the top that others reacted so strongly to a comment clearly meant to be funny, but when it comes to safety, it's better to be cautious than tragically wrong. As Jim Croce reminds us with his advice in You Don't Mess Around with Jim, you don't tug on Superman's cape, you don't spit in the wind, you don't pull the mask off the old Lone Ranger, and you don't make jokes about explosive devices in airports. Or something like that. We're paraphrasing. Number 2, step-by-step over text. A sinister plot unfolded in Indiana, where investigators allege the mother-daughter duo of Ashley Jones and Marsha Allen conspired to poison Harold Allen using antifreeze and toxic plants they ordered online. But the most shocking detail was that the plan didn't end with one victim, and the evidence suggests a far darker motive yet to be uncovered. The scheme allegedly began in November of 2022, when Ashley Jones researched various poisons and purchased ethylene glycol, a compound found in antifreeze, as well as toxic plants such as foxglove and water hemlock. Text messages between Jones and her mother detailed plans to poison Harold with food and beverages, including a root beer float and chili. Despite multiple failed attempts with foxglove and water hemlock, the two persisted. Then, on December 19th of 2022, Harold had a root beer float allegedly laced with antifreeze, which led to his demise the following day. Initially, his passing appeared natural. However, nearly a year later, a burglary investigation at Marcia Allen's home revealed a dark secret. Ashley Jones's plot came undone when a burglary at her mother's house led investigators to a much darker discovery. Jones had allegedly recruited Stephen White and Nathaniel Napier to break into Marcia Allen's home as part of a scheme to access hidden assets and financial information so she could take the money for herself. According to investigators, Jones thought her mother had total control over Harold Allen's savings and retirement funds, which were key motives in the poisoning plot. But the plan backfired when White was caught, since he chose to roll over on Jones to save his own skin. In doing so, he revealed that Jones and her mother had conspired to poison Harold Allen, her stepfather, nearly a year earlier. White's confession obviously shifted the entire focus of the investigation, which caused detectives to examine Marcia Allen's phone, uncovering a series of damning text messages. These messages outlined the pair's meticulous planning, from ordering toxic substances online to plotting Harold's final meal, the root beer float laced with antifreeze. Jones and Marcia's texts fully exposed their detailed planning, including warnings about handling toxic plants and attempts to cover their tracks. Court documents also showed Jones's financial motive, as she was after Harold's savings and retirement funds. Jones had even mocked her mother's earlier failed poisoning attempts, then claiming that she masterminded the operation once it was successful, which is a weird thing to get competitive about. But anyway, Marcia Allen passed away in October of 2023, shortly after being questioned by police. Authorities suspect that she may have taken her own life, but haven't ruled out other possibilities. Meanwhile, Jones faces multiple felony charges. As of the release of this video, Jones's trial is scheduled for January of 2025. If convicted, she could face life imprisonment without parole. The dumbest part of all of this? If they hadn't been so brain dead with their texts or impatient with their plotting, they might have actually gotten away with it. But thankfully, greed and overconfidence always seem to trip up the worst criminals. It's a comfort to know that sometimes people's own stupidity is what brings justice. Number 1. No Christmas bonus. On Christmas Eve of 24, in Brevard County, Florida, a troubling incident unfolded involving a 29-year-old entitled housekeeper, Heather Nelson, and her 83-year-old employer. Nelson somehow felt she was owed a $500 Christmas bonus from the elderly woman. When the employer explained she couldn't afford the bonus, Nelson's demeanor completely changed. According to the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, Nelson forcibly grabbed the victim's checkbook, nearly breaking her wrists in the process. She then left, going on a spending spree after she wrote herself a check for $1,400 and used the victim's credit card to pay her rent and make additional purchases. Adding to the betrayal, Nelson stole Christmas cards containing checks that were intended to be mailed to the victim's loved ones. Sheriff Wayne Ivey wasn't very happy with Nelson's behavior, referring to her as a Grinch who tried to steal Christmas from the elderly woman. He was outraged, not only by Nelson's unnecessary physicality, but also at the theft of gifts meant for others, asking, what was Nelson going to do next? Kick the dog? The investigation, led by Agent Kevin Sherrill, revealed the extent of Nelson's fraudulent activities. After the stolen check cleared and the unauthorized credit card transactions were posted, authorities obtained a warrant for her arrest. Nelson was apprehended in January of 25 and was hit with multiple charges. During the arrest, Sheriff Ivey was there and noted that Nelson was really concerned about being publicly shamed on social media, making literally everyone who heard her whining roll their eyes. In response, Ivey said that Nelson had brought this on herself, so obviously there was very little concern. He further commented that instead of the absurd bonus, Nelson would receive a keepsake booking photo a slightly used pair of shower slides, and unlimited access to our world-famous one-star dining facility where she could enjoy absolutely nothing she eats. Nelson was held on a $30,000 bond and has since been released, but court proceedings are still pending as of the release of this video. We know that online public shaming can get way out of hand. The internet has a reputation for ruthlessly going after people for anything and everything if it's offended. And while we absolutely do not condone any threats being made or acted upon, we are not entirely against the idea of Nelson's reputation taking a nasty hit on social media. Her dumb decision to escalate a denied $500 bonus into outright theft and fraud, leaving an obvious paper trail, wasn't only wrong, but also very stupid. What exactly was the plan here? Writing herself a $1,400 check and using a stolen credit card was for sure going to get her caught. If public shaming serves as a deterrent to behavior like this, maybe we should seriously consider bringing it back. Perhaps a little reputational accountability is exactly what's needed to keep things like this from happening again. Click to watch one of these next videos.